Okay, so just to give you a background, this work is motivated the fact that Africa is becoming most vulnerable because of climate changes due to the socio-economic and political problems and low adaptive capacity, multi-stressor across different time scales. And then this one is now coming to the point where climate variability solves this, because in a changing climate, this climate variability is also bringing a lot of challenges to the continent, and then the climate changes also. So this, based on this assessment, is particularly the recent reports is coming from the WMO, the intensification of certain extreme events, like the droughts, floods, heat waves, wildfires, among others. This is particularly since the 1970s, with noticeable increases since the last decade as well. So climate change is also likely to increase in terms of frequency, in terms of length of the extremes as weather events. This is based on the IPCC Working Group 1's Assessment 6 report, which is just out in the last August. So this work is more like this with a regional focus, and then also like it's going at the catchment level to some extent. So I will just give you one case study is like done on one of the measures, river basins in South Africa. So the methodology is we are using the crude data for the historical assessment. This is based on the latest version of the crude data from 1901 to 2019. And then we are also using the regional climate model downscaling based on the CMIP5 forcing. We just use 6 models to force the models with and the differences RCP scenarios for this particular presentations. I'm just focusing in the interest of time just for the worst case scenario, which is RCP 8.5. And then we also considered along the lines of the temperature, the global temperature goals, and then also focusing on the 3 degrees Celsius world for this particular presentation. And then also I will try to show the sensitivity of the models to the aerosol force. This probably casts a lot of uncertainty in the model projections as well, so that is really coming from the aerosol alone. So this is, I think, based on certain assumptions. Of course, the outcomes might be overclouded by the aerosol uncertainty as well. In terms of the indices that we use, this is about the drought, and then we just use 2 drought indices. The first one is the SPI. Well, I'm not going to go into detail. This is in terms of the mathematical attribution of these indices, because they are well documented elsewhere. And then the second one is the SPI, which is, I think, taking into consideration the water loss from the surface. And then we try to analyze this one based on the projections, the historical perspective, as well as from the projections relative to the baseline. So we also try to do a little bit in terms of the significance test to compare the baseline, the projections against the baselines, as whether these two data sets are belongs to the same population, which is, I think, this approach is given handy solutions without actually using the observations. He just compares the model data whether they are from the same population. In terms of the result, this is based on the crew data that we just use the extract the information for the Orange River Basin. This is, I think, the major river basin in South Africa. We just consider the South African domains here. And then based on this one, we just check the temperatures and the moisture loss in terms of the potential evapotranspiration, as well as the two indices. So what we see here is, especially considering just the SPI, and then we don't really see that this like a sort of unusual patterns in the last 100 or so years. This is, I think, just clearly showing that the SPI is clearly explained by the natural variability. But when you check the SPI, there is a strong signal coming from the temperatures and then the water loss due to the temperature as well. So particularly in the first part of the 20th century, then we clearly see that there is a gradual decline of the temperature, which is clearly the reflections of what we see in the temperature as well as in the moisture deficit here. But coming to the latest ones, there is a significant decrease in terms of moisture budget, which is, I think, sounds like a rapid moisture deficit era as comparing to the SPI, which is not really the case when we see in terms of this stress. So basically, the SPI is like seems like business as usual, just from up to this the period that we considered. In terms of the projection, this is we have this robust model evaluation because we are evaluating the models in other time scales like the seasonal time scale. But what we did here is just to show whether the model is capturing the observed trend. And then we also applied a Spearman correlation at different lag time. And then I cannot really see the figures here, but we just put this asterisk when the correlation is also significant. So basically, we have seen a little bit problems for the Eastern Africa parts is where the model doesn't seem to capture the observed trend here. But it's clearly showing that there is an intensification of the flooding as we go into toward the end of the century. For the Southern Africa, there is a clear indication that there is a gradual shift of the SPIs toward the end of the century, which is particularly starting to the 2040s. And then for the West African, it sounds like this is more like stabilizations toward the 2040s as well, which is clearly the reflection of the 1920s and the 1950s, which seems like, according to this model, of course, probably there is no strong signal is coming based on these projections using the SPI. So this one is also the animation showing that the transitions is in the two cases where we have the SPIs, which is clearly showing that toward the end of the century becomes very much worse, in contrast to the SPI. So yeah, so this is what we have based on this assessment. We indicated that the Western Cape is business as usual toward the end of the century, and then but there is a clear signals in terms of the decreasing trends and increasing trends for the other regions considered. So in terms of the projections, this is, I think, the time-weighted tendencies or frequencies in terms of the drought using the two indices. Then, as we can see here, that this is also in the cases of the SPIs, the Southern Africa is coming under pressure, under stress. So the end of the century, it's under the 3 temperature goal. But when we consider the SPIs, obviously there is no win-win situation here. In fact, the entire African continent is coming under moisture stresses when the moisture loss from the surface is considered. So in terms of the moral sensitivity based on the aerosol, then we might have a different scenario here, particularly checking the Southern Africa regions. It seems like there's a complete change in terms of what we have seen in the previous screen. This may change the conclusion in terms of the Southern Africa, the dryness and the more the moisture stress that we have seen in the previous slides, as well as in the IPCC report as well. So this one is like sort of concern, the fact that the model is actually showing this type of sensitivity when the aerosol scheme is activated in the model. So just to conclude, so what we have to see is that the northeastern Africa, including the Sahara Desert and Southern Africa, may be exposed to floods or extreme weights and drought tendencies, respectively, relative to the baseline climate. West Africa seems business as usual. Model sensitivity to aerosol scheme tends to produce weight bias to the extent which may lead to the different conclusion, particularly for the Southern Africa region. So the continent may only face a drought tendency outcomes as when moisture loss due to potential evapotranspiration is accounted. So the SPI seems to rapidly changing, while the SPI is like there is a slow shift in the trend, particularly for the Southern Africa region. So right now, as we are considering with the new simulations based on the CMIP6 forcing, particularly considering the different SSP scenarios, which is ongoing work. And then the other one is we are also trying to consider the mechanism behind, particularly in the area of why the SPI is actually gradually shifting in the Southern Africa region toward the 2040s. So we just want to check whether there is something to do with the regime changing in terms of some of the rainfall bearing systems. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm glad to answer your questions.